As fantastic a CFP as Mel O is, as wonderful an attorney as I am, and as good as Stormy is at whatever it is he does, please do note that anything said in our podcasts are our opinions alone and are not meant to be taken as financial or legal advice.
Welcome to Finances, the Other F Word, a Gen Xer podcast for musicians and music lovers, where we discuss money and music without all the pretentious bullshit. Here are your hosts, Zoe Terry, attorney at large, Stormy Andrews, founder of Yokel Local Marketing, and Mel O, certified financial planner and author of Finances, the Other F Word. Listener discretion is advised.
Hey guys, welcome to Finances, the Other F Word. And today on the podcast, we're going to be continuing our series on churches and taxation. And we're going to be talking a little bit today about the Catholic Church and the Mormon Church. This is our fourth episode in quarantine, which feels like the 400th episode in quarantine. But, you know, people need some kind of entertainment. Hopefully bring a little bit of it to them. And I don't know. I mean, at least in my head, I feel like we're doing a little bit something, but I don't know. Maybe not.
Oh, I think we're doing our bit to entertain the masses. I feel entertained.
I like it. I mean, it makes me feel better. I mean, that and, you know, couple relaxing.
I've got a fruity-based drink on the go, and that's helping too. Cheers.
Dink. So what interesting happened today, Zoe? Anything?
Well, it's funny you should ask, Mel O, but the Thunderbirds did a flyover today to say thank you to the healthcare workers and first responders. Of course, in true me fashion, I made the boys and my husband traipse down the end of the street and go to our little gazebo park area in our neighborhood, which I thought would be a prime spot for viewing. It was not. And I think we caught the tail end, the arse end of one of the planes before the boys got bored and buggered off. And yeah, but I did get one photo of them, but I've seen other people's photos and you could hear them, and it was pretty spectacular. Did you see them?
I did. Well, they're because of my proximity to Nellis. Right. They hit us first. And so I was going to walk out. I was walking out in the street, and then I was like, oh, I'll go to the park. And there's all these people congregated at the park in my neighborhood. I'm going, okay, this doesn't. So then I went to the other park in my neighborhood, and we were joined, the people that are out there by a family of little kids and a little girl who kept talking to me about making a smoothie. So I was like, that's great, you know? Yeah. She was very cute, though, and she was showing me her glasses folded up and stuff like that. And poor thing, she's probably just so bored. She's like, another person who's not my family, let me talk to them. And I was okay with that. But at first when I heard, God, I'm such a cynic. At first when I heard about the Thunderbirds flying by to support or show their support for the healthcare workers, I was like, yeah, but that's not really helping, is it? I mean, like, I get it. It's, you know, yay, good. I mean, that's great. But at the same time, maybe help transport something. I mean, I don't know. But then upon seeing it, I was like, oh, it does make you have kind of a little warm, fuzzy feeling. But I was kind of going, you know, it was great for what it was. But at the same time, I don't know. I guess I just aesthetic stuff like that. I'm like, yeah, it's nice. But, you know, is it substantial? But it was great. I mean, and I love that. Obviously, I'm a Air Force brat from both my parents, and I love seeing them in the sky. And I don't know if it's them or the Blue Angels do the missing man maneuver, but every time they do it, I cry like a little girl. Have you seen that?
I don't think so.
It's I can't remember which one it is that does it, but all 5 planes like they did today fly, and then all of a sudden one breaks off and goes like pretty much straight up in the air.
Oh, yeah.
And it's supposed to be like, you know, those who were lost in war, and every Every time I see it, I cry. Whether it's on TV or in person at an air show, I cry every time like a little bitch. So before
I didn't even know that's what it signified. So maybe if I did, I might get
next time. There's
emotional.
next time. Yeah, there's next time.
Mm-hmm.
And
well, I'll no doubt be in a, hey, look, there's no one else here. This is a great spot. It's a great spot because you're surrounded by trees and you can't see anything, mother. Is what I was told afterwards. But.
And the houses and everything. And but I mean, it was great. And they had released the flight plan, and it looked a little bit like a male organ, which of course made me giggle like a 8th grader. But it was very. Did you see it?
No.
It looks like
that might have been a good idea too.
I'll send you a picture. Seriously.
Okay.
But it looks like a male organ. So anyway, before we get started into the third part of this series, I just wanted to address something real quick with you guys. I know that it's okay, Zoe. We're used to it. I know you guys are smart. I think our listeners are super smart and amazing people. I've also heard extremely good looking. But one of the things, there's a lot of scams going around right now, and there's a couple that I've seen on Facebook that are ridiculous, where somebody supposedly comes to your door with masks and they say, hey, we're from the CDC or something, and we're handing out masks to everybody here. Do you want to try it on? And then supposedly when you put the mask on, it has ether, and then you pass out, they take your stuff, which to me is comical because I'm assuming ether has a smell. Right? So it's like, oh, hi, stranger. I'd love to put on this mask. I mean, that's ridiculous. Hopefully that's not even true and that's made up. And then, of course, with the federal stimulus checks supposed to be supposedly coming out next week. I don't know. I'll believe it when I see it. There's going to be a lot of scams. So obviously, if somebody's calling you and asking for your account information to get your stuff direct deposited, the federal government does not do that. So please don't give out your information. But even more so, I had somebody who had contacted me who had supposedly worked with me at one of my other firms. And the email that it came from was blah, blah, commodities and at Gmail. And in there, there's small talk about, hey, you know, blah, 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 whatever, basically general information that you could have gotten off any of my professional profiles. And then she wants to know if I can be the trustee on a trust account that's going to have a sizable amount of money coming into it, but she did not need a financial advisor. So
she wasn't an Iberian prince, was she?
She wasn't, no. She was supposedly somebody I had worked with before. I'm talking like probably in 2003. And so anyway, the point is that I very, very professionally told her basically to fuck off. That I couldn't help her, and that I couldn't help her set up a trust, and I was not going to be the trustee on a trust that was going to be a sizable amount of money. And at the bottom of the email, there is this huge disclaimer that the person who sent you this email is not a licensed broker-dealer, nor are they a financial advisor per SEC, blah, 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 all this other kind of crap. So there's two things with that, guys. If you're getting financial advice from anybody who has to put a disclaimer like that on the bottom of their emails, please run the other way as fast as possible. This is the deal. You can't, the reason why there's that whole big disclaimer there about soliciting is because you were not allowed to solicit somebody. Like I couldn't, if I didn't have a license, I couldn't tell Zoe, hey Zoe, you know what, my friend owns this company over here and they have stock and I think you should buy some stock in it and we're going to put it through my trust and I'm going to facilitate the buy for you through like an E-Trade or an Ameritrade platform. That's a solicitation. You cannot do that if you are not a licensed advisor. So if you're getting approached by anybody, especially now when people are scared, saying that they're going to do any kind of thing for you and they are not FINRA compliant, they are not any of those governing bodies. If they have to have a disclaimer like that, and if you see a blah blah commodities at gmail.com, please, for the love of God, don't talk to these people. It's just dangerous. I mean, hey, it's your money. You can do what you want to do. But I just really wanted to caution our listeners because there's a ton of scams that are going around out there right now. And I just don't want to see you guys fall victim to any of it. So I just wanted to make sure we address that real quick. So before we kick it over to Zoe covering the Mormon Church, we are going to talk really quickly about what the IRS looks at as far as to be a church. So the thing that's kind of interesting is with the IRS is that they don't really have specifically, so basically anybody can say they're a church. They have some kind of loose guidelines that you would want to have some of those in place. And if you do, then you fall under the criteria, but it's pretty much a basis, like a case-by-case basis. So let's just go really quickly over some of the things that the IRS considers that you would have to be a church. And this will come back when we're talking about the Catholic Church specifically. A distinct legal existence, a recognized creed and form of worship, a definite and distinct ecclesiastical, I can never say it, thank you, ecclesiastical government, a formal code of doctrine and discipline, a distinct religious history, a membership not associated with any other church or denomination, ordained ministers ministering to its congregations, ordained ministers selected after completing prescribed studies, a literature of its own, established place of worship, regular congregations, regular religious services, Sunday schools for religious instructions of the young, and school for the preparation of its ministers. So according to the IRS, that is kind of loosely the things that they're going to be looking at. And basically, if you think that your church would be able to qualify as a church under the tax exempt status of the IRS code, there's a form that you can fill out. And basically with that, you would get the status of tax exemption, which is what we've been talking about in this podcast. So we're going to talk a little bit about the Catholic Church and the Mormon Church. Those are two churches that are, quite frankly, they're the biggest targets, right? Like the last episode we talked about Joel Osteen. He's kind of an easy target right now, and I don't have anything against the man personally. I don't know if he does a ton of donations or if he's a douche. I have no idea. And we also don't have anything personal against the Catholic or Mormon Church. These are just the churches specifically in the Vegas area. We have the Mormon Church has a very big footprint here in Vegas, which you would not expect. So I'm going to kick it over to Zoe to give us kind of the rundown on some numbers she found out about on the Mormon Church.
And of course, just like any other church, it's really hard to find these numbers because they don't have to disclose their financials.
Correct.
In this country. Now, in the UK and Canada, they do. So the Mormon Church, for example, and any church would, but here they don't. So, I'm just going to briefly talk about how the Church of the Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or the LDS Church, or Mormons, and I'm just going to refer to them as the Mormon Church just for ease of reference, although my understanding is that that's not how they currently like to be referred to for the purposes of to call them anything else. So we just for these purposes, we're talking about the Church of the Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, LDS Church, and how they make their money and what they do with it, as far as we're able to find out, given that they are tax exempt and they don't have to make financial disclosures. And obviously I'm not the money person, so correct me if I say anything.
Yeah, and we're also not CPAs, and we are not giving you any type of tax advice. First of all, if you're taking tax advice from us, yeah, you should probably stop listening to the podcast right now and then go Google good CPA in your location.
Okay, so first of all, in terms of, where do they get their money from? I think most people have heard of tithing, which is where the members of the congregation are supposed to give the church 10% of their income. That 10% goes to Salt Lake, to the main center there, and we'll get to what happens to that, or is supposed to happen to that, later on. There is also another example, another kind of tithing called fast offerings. On fast Sundays, I think it's once a month, Mormons miss 2 meals on fast Sunday so that they feel closer to God. And the money that you would have spent on those meals is a kind of tithing. You're supposed to give to your church. Now those fast offerings are supposed to go to your local church. Okay, so they're the tithings there. So that's the tithings. Now, as most people know, Mormons have to wear specific underwear, which they have to pay for. They're currently around $5 a set. Now, full disclosure, my husband is a recovering Mormon, as he likes to say. So, this isn't all just from research. This is from a family member who was in the Mormon church for many, many years. And we still have family members who are in the church. So he said, he had about 20 sets at any one time. And so for the women and the men, there's a top part and there's a bottom part. It's about $5 a set. And there's very limited places that would sell them. You can probably get them online. But here in Vegas, it's the Deseret bookstore that you get them from. But you can't just go in and anyone get them. It's at the back of the store. And you have to show your temple card or something you have to show to be able to even buy them. So that's that, your underwear, Missions. Every male, when they reach 18, is, I was going to say strongly encouraged, but I'm not even sure that's a nice way of putting it. Every boy, when they reach 18, and girl, when they reach 19, is supposed to go on a mission. And for boys, it's for 2 years, and for girls, it's 18 months. Now, I don't know I think there's a popular misconception that the church pays for this mission. They do not. The families pay for that. And currently, it's $450 a month, which the family has to pay for.
While they're gone? The $450 a month while they're gone?
Yes, pay to the church to cover their living expenses.
While they're on the mission, I guess is what I'm asking though.
Yeah,
so
while they're on the mission.
Got it.
You send it, just like your tithings, to Salt Lake City.
Okay,
right?
got it.
So now, don't get me wrong, because if a family cannot afford that, the church will cover that. Of course they will, because let's not forget, while these 60,000 or however many thousand young people they have all over the world doing these missions are doing this for free. It's voluntary, it's free labor, what they're doing, spreading the word of God, and plenty of other stuff that they actually do. But that's a whole other story. And in actual fact, as of July 2020, that's going to increase to $500 per month. Mm. So let's be clear, this is the church with its billions of dollars is not paying for these kids to go to, and they can go anywhere. They can go anywhere in the country or anywhere in the world, right?
Do you, and you might not know the answer to this, the $450 a month that you guys pay, is that tax deductible?
I don't know. I'd have to ask my husband.
But I'm wondering if it's considered a donation. Actually,
Sure.
You know what? Let me look right now while we're doing this.
Okay. Property we'll get to in a minute, because they own so much property. It's unbelievable. But one kind of property they own, particularly in Utah, is they own farms all over the place. And their labor on the farms is volunteers, is church members, and the workers who work the farms are church members who work the farms, picking, canning, things like that, for free, okay, as part of their duties. So not only do they have these farms producing goods, the labor on those farms is free. Then you have people like the bishops and the people working for the churches lower down. For example, the church that my family member goes to, his bishop is also a well-known orthodontist. So he doesn't get paid to be the bishop of this church. I don't know if he gets any expenses, but I doubt it. So all of that is voluntary too. Do you see what I mean? It's higher up, as always, where they get stipends and compensated for housing and living expenses and things like that, which we'll get to in a minute. But lower down, the people cleaning the churches and even giving the sermons and things like that are all volunteers. It's you've got to show your commitment and your faith, because you're doing it all for free, right? They own as well. We'll get to the property in a minute, but the Mormon Church owns 4 learning institutes. Brigham Young University, which I think most people know about in Utah. There's also BYU in Idaho, BYU in Hawaii, and the LDS Business College. CES owns the seminary program. Now, for all kids aged 14 to 18 have to go through seminary. To be able to go on a mission, they have to go through the seminary program. So my family member, before school would have to go to seminary for an hour or so every single morning to learn more about. It's not enough that you go to church for however long on a Sunday. You would also have to go through the CES seminary program before you and complete it properly and be checked off before you're even allowed to go on this mission that we pay, that the family pays for. Also, interestingly, the Mormon Church owns several schools, elementary schools in the Pacific Islands and Mexico. They own I think it's the world's largest. It's definitely it is the world's largest beef ranch in Florida.
Beef, like cows?
Yep.
Okay.
It's called the Deseret Cattle and Citrus Ranch. It's 670,000 acres, 1,000 square miles of land. The land is worth, as of 1997, I can't, goodness knows how much it is now. The land was worth $858 million.
Wow.
They own a newspaper, the Deseret News, which is the second largest newspaper in Utah. They also own a magazine. They own a bank, or at least partly own a bank. We're going to get to what else. AG Reserves, which is the largest producer of nuts in the U.S. The Beneficial Financial
I got to
Group.
say it. Of
Go on.
these nuts. All right, sorry. Go ahead.
It had to be done.
It had to.
Beneficial Financial Group, which is an insurance and financial services group, which has $3.1 billion worth of assets. They own Bonneville International, which is the 14th largest radio chain in the US. Farmland Reserve Inc., which owns 228,000 acres in Nebraska and 51,600 acres in Oklahoma. And then,
real quick, and you said they own an investment firm?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wow.
And
I wonder how I never knew that.
I'm going to get to the big news in a minute. There's a really big article that broke just last year that kind of it was big news about that. But going back to the staff and the preachers, as with most organizations, and you were talking about televangelists last podcast, the former president of the church was Thomas Monson. He died in 2017. His estimated net worth was $14 million when he died. He didn't, of course, take a salary. No. But along with the 12 apostles, he lived in a condo that was worth a 24,000 square foot condo that was worth, I think, $2.8 million. They were compensated through housing, living allowances, and I believe a stipend, things that we will never find out, what the value was, because they just don't have to disclose it. But clearly, somehow, he was managed to amass a fortune that was worth millions of dollars by the time he died. And general authorities who are somewhere down the line in list of, authority, their base living allowance in 2014 was $120,000. So these aren't, whereas other functions are performed by church members on a voluntary basis. The day-to-day functions are dealt with for free. So there was a Newsweek article written by Paul Glader in December 2019, and we'll post the link to this. It was co-published with Religion Unplugged. And he published an article about that the Mormon Church had stockpiled $100 billion billion, not million, $billion intended for charities and misled church members. And it was basically a whistleblower who filed a complaint with the IRS last November, so
Real
2019.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Alleging that a non-profit organization that's controlled by the Mormon Church, partly using the tithes of their members, had amassed more than $100 billion in investment funds and had misled the members as to what this money was being used for. And the name of the company was Ensign Peak Advisors, Inc. And so it owned assets under the management of the church that had grown from $10 billion to $100 billion in the past 22 years, using investments, but also tithings from the church. And as an arm of the Mormon Church, they're registered under Section 509A3 of their IRS code. And so it's not subject to disclosure requirements. But like I said, this various documents got leaked by this whistleblower that indicated that the firm did receive billions each year from tithing revenue. And from the tithings and the investments that they'd made, that's how much they currently held. And they had used this money. Oh, and out of this money, most importantly, this company, I'll just call it EPA for short reference, had given away a whopping $0 to religious, educational, or charitable purposes. $0. And the church has not had to disclose any financial information since 1959, and so hasn't. And like I said, in the past 22 years, this whistleblower has alleged that this company that is an arm of the church has made $0 contributions to that, to religious, educational, charitable distributions. Instead, the EPA had helped construct the City Creek Center Mall in Temple Square in downtown Salt Lake City. And the church had vehemently denied that any tithings had gone towards constructing this mall. Denied it. Said it was all from their investments. No tax dollars or tithes will be used in that construction. That's what they said. But the whistleblower alleged that $1.4 billion of funding did go towards the mall project and came from a funding pool that included tithing dollars. And the mall opened in 2012. It's got over 100 stalls. The main competitor City Creek Mall ended up seeing a huge decline in its business and ended up selling out to someone else, became a ghost town. Per this article, which I really encourage you to read because it's very interesting, it says that no other major church in the US is as active as the Mormon Church in economic life, nor per capita as successful as it. And now it has over 16 million members, 65,000 full-time missionaries around the world. And really the true extent of its wealth just isn't known. And like I said, it hasn't had to make any disclosures to its members about its use of its money since 1959. And tithing is something that they are, the members are, that you have to do. You're a Mormon bishop in El Salvador was quoted as saying, if paying tithing means that you can't pay for water or electricity, pay tithing. If paying tithing means that you can't pay your rent, pay tithing. Even if paying tithing means you don't have enough money to feed your family, pay tithing. So although tithing is supposed to be seen as a way for the church staff to pay their expenses and things like that, well, I've already told you that the tithing goes to Salt Lake. It doesn't go to the local churches. And it seems very, very shady, to say the least. So it's a very interesting read. It's, like I said, that they have the right to do what they, well, I guess they have a right to do what they want with the money that they have amassed. But firstly, I think that they should be taxed. And secondly, I think they should be transparent about what money they have and what they're doing with it. If not to us, then at the very least to their members, but I think to us and to everyone. But it's, they are quite a force to be reckoned with.
Yeah, and so there's a couple things, and I worked with a Mormon gentleman who is actually a great guy. I actually worked with a couple Mormons at my old firm, all great guys, and one of them specifically said he was a recovering Mormon, and I'm not slamming him, I'm using his words. And one of his big problems was, he said that the fact is that he didn't believe that God wanted you to tithe to the church if it meant that you could not feed your family or clothe them or keep them warm. He thought that was what was intended with the whole tithing thing, and that was a big bone of contention with him. And then going back, I did actually check, and according to this website, according to the IRS publication 526, generally it says, quote, generally you can claim a charitable contribution deduction for travel expenses necessarily incurred while you are away from home performing services for a charitable organization, only if there is no significant element of personal pleasure, recreation, or vacation in the travel. And so, as in this article goes on to further say that is provided it's over $250 or more, then you actually look like you do get a write-off for those services. And if we do have any Mormon listeners out there and you haven't turned us off yet, if you want to email us and let us know if you are being able to deduct it, hopefully I'm hoping that you are. Because if, regardless of the religion you're in, if you're spreading God's word and you're having to flip the bill for it, I really hope that you're getting the ability to write off that stuff, because there's a time value of money. There's a whole bunch of other things when we're talking about financials that it takes for somebody to incur that. And then going back here to the IRS, some of the IRS publications, and this is going to come up when we start talking about the Catholic Church here in a minute. Now, they are, for churches and other nonprofits, they do not have to pay taxes on unearned income. So if you have money in a savings account and it earns $50, $100 in interest in a year, that's considered unearned income, but that is still taxable to you as a person. So for a church or other nonprofit, unearned income is typically not taxed, and this would include donations, gifts, grants, which is very important. We're going to come back to that, and investment income. And if it regularly engages in a business activity that is not to its religious mission, then they could be subject to unrelated business income tax. So there was one case in particular where the IRS found a church in violation of the unrelated business income tax because they were regularly hiring out their members to plant seedlings on forest land owned by private landowners, and then the church would in turn pocket the money. And the rule is that if a church owns $1,000 or more in gross receipts from an unrelated trade or business, then that is considered a taxable event. However, income that churches earn from bingo games, thrift shops, volunteer work, donor lists, low-cost giveaways, and advertising is not subject to the UBIT. And so when we're talking about the Catholic Church in particular, it's the same thing with Zoe we've talked about on this podcast before. You don't have to release taxable information when you are a nonprofit. And so a lot of the information that I was able to put together, I had to kind of jimmy rig it together. Number one, Number two, the stuff is a little bit out of date as comparative to now. And I'm not sure, I would assume that the Catholic Church is probably more wealthy than the Mormon Church, only because of the simple fact that they've been around longer. And a lot of the stuff that they have, the assets that they have is, priceless artifacts, religious or otherwise, or paintings from, the great painters that maybe was donated to the church at the beginning of their careers, or various different things. So there's a lot of different things you can donate to a church. You can donate cash, you can donate a piano, you can donate a picture of Christ, you can donate a whole bunch of different stuff, and it depends on what you donate and in the manner that you donate it. As far as like if you donated a painting to in this case, we're talking about the Catholic Church, a Catholic Boys and Girls Club or of something, that doesn't really, that's not, it's like, okay, that's nice, but that's not really for use. But if you donated, 100 basketballs, then that's something in that specific example that they can actually use. And so those are looked at a different way in the IRS code. Again, talk to your CPA, but cash is always an above the line deduction. But again, you need to go talk to your CPA. So I went about this a couple different ways. Like what Zoe was referring to as far as the Mormon Church owning the largest cattle ranch, there is a ton of land that is owned by the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church owns property in all 50 states as well as most every country. And this has came from a variety of just being part of the history of the world for so long as they have. And one of the things that came up is that there was just not too long ago, in 2017, there was an issue that came up because in Florida, they own a bit of land. And the deal with the Catholic Church, as far as when we're talking about how much land they own, it is estimated, again, we don't know, it is estimated that the church holdings are close to 177 million acres. So this is the Catholic Church estimate of 177 million acres, or 277,000 square miles, if you group those properties together from all over the world. And they're kind of set up in the same kind of way. There's different parishes, and when somebody ties to that specific parish, what ends up happening is that it kind of stays locally, but then any of the other income is kind of pulled together as part of a bigger network. And so there was a couple questions about if a parish declares bankruptcy, can the bankruptcy court have access to that other income? And that's too heavy of conversation for me to understand or get into. And what happens is when they have all of these parcels of land that they have, they're not paying any type of property tax on them, and most of it is underdeveloped. So there was this whole issue that arose up in Florida, and what ended up happening was that they were basically saying, hey, you're occupying these valuable parcels of land and you're not paying property taxes. And so we think you're exacerbating the affordability crisis that all these cities are facing, because you have land that you're not putting into use, that you're not developing. So you're just sitting on it and you're not paying any property taxes. So why wouldn't you sit on it? And an asset doesn't really have value until you sell it. I mean, you can get an appraisal on a piece of land, but until you sell the piece of land and you recognize the gain or loss, you really haven't recognized any from it. Everything at that point is either unrealized gains or unrealized losses. And so in Massachusetts, the Supreme Court had ruled that, so there was a big Catholic shrine and on nearly 200 acres, and they had determined that only a small portion of it was actually used for worshiping services. So they had 200 acres with a very small shrine on it. And so what ended up happening is that they sent the place where the shrine was, they sent them a $92,000 tax bill for the fact that they were getting tax exemption on the majority of this land, and they were not taking care of it, and it was not truly meant for worship. So the Catholic Church has about 1 billion adherents throughout the world. Now, as I had previously mentioned, the estimate puts them at holding anywhere close to about 177 million acres or 277,000 square miles when put all together. And it is unclear if that land has buildings on it or not, because the Catholic Church has a lot of outreaches like schools and hospitals, and they have about hundreds of thousands and millions of these different ones worldwide. And so nobody really knows how much exactly that the church owns. And I found an interesting article, and I'm going to post it in the resources, where I came across a lady who was looking at it from an environmental standpoint. And she worked with another group and was trying to get a kind of a rough idea. And she's a Catholic. She was going to be a nun. And she was looking to try to put together something from a environmental standpoint to see how much land is owned by the Catholic Church so that they could start to do something. So just to kind of give you another context of how big this actually is that they had to determine that if the Catholic parishes planted an average of just 3 trees on only 70% of their entire property, it would take 10 million pounds of carbon out of the air each year. So if that doesn't give you kind of an idea of how much the Catholic Church owns, whenever they've been gifted it or however it, ended up coming down. There was a whole thing when Henry VIII, everybody knows King Henry VIII from England, and he broke off from the Catholic Church because he wanted to divorce his first wife, Catherine of Aragon. And what ended up happening is that it is said that that King Henry took a lot of land from the Catholic Church and a lot of artifacts and things of that nature. But just so you guys can have a really big understanding of how much assets that this specific religion actually has underway. And so we talked a little bit about before on the last episode that anytime you're paying a salary to your priest, you are going to be giving them taxable income, but then there are other things as far as like living expenses and so forth like that. Now, when we're talking about the Catholic Church and we're talking about how they're actually organized, each diocese is separately incorporated entity. So where in Zoe's example, the money goes into the ward and then it is sent up to Salt Lake City, the dioceses are all kind of their own thing. They're their own spiritual organization, and they're not reflected though as a legal organization, and they are not going to be subject to nonprofit accounting or reporting rules. And so that kind of goes back behind what we keep talking about with the nonprofits of the church. And when we're talking about, and I was trying to find an unbiased article about if the Catholic Church started paying taxes on the money that they get, how much it would actually be helpful. And to be quite honest with you, I looked up 3 or 4 articles and they were all really biased as hell. And I was just like, I can't trust their numbers. So I kind of steered away from that. So I don't really know how much that they actually get in revenue, but I can tell you a little bit about their expenses. And so when we talk about their expenses, and I'm going to jump around here a little bit. So when we talk about their expenses, it was said in 2010, again, because the numbers we're going to have are going to be older because they're kind of mix and matched together. In 2010, Catholic Charities, which is a huge charity system all over the world, but very big over in the United States, they reported their expenditures between $4.2 billion and $4.4 billion a year. And so there was a ranking that was based in, let's see if I can get the Chronicle of Philanthropy, and they posted kind of a list of all of the biggest charities in the United States, and this is where they pulled some of those numbers from. So in context and into that, when we're talking about the Catholic just system as far as money, we're looking at, again, a web of schools, of hospitals, universities, and charities, and those combined do serve millions of people. So in 2012, there was an investigation by The Economist, and they pulled a couple different numbers, and they calculated a sum of approximately that the Catholic Church at the time of 2012 spent approximately $170 billion a year in spending. spending. So they spent $170 billion in a year, and they estimated, the economists, that $150 billion are for the hospitals and higher education. So let's kind of put that into context. Let's talk about Apple and General Motors. General Motors and Apple have revenues of about $150 billion worldwide in the fiscal year of 2012. That was revenues. So Apple and General Motors in the same year of 2012 made approximately $150 billion. The Catholic Church, by the economist estimates, spent at that time $170 billion in annual spending. So either the Catholic Church is running a huge deficit, which I hardly doubt, or they are really, really pulling in some serious money. And again, if you have a whole bunch of land that you're sitting on, and it's very hard to take their assets into consideration because you have priceless things, you have priceless antiques, you have priceless paintings. I mean, you can't really put a price on it. And so it makes it very hard for you to try to get a net worth of the actual Catholic Church. But again, according to The Economist, about $170 billion a year in spending. And the thing that I found the most interesting is that with the Catholic Charities, and I mean, I'm all for charities of any kind, and the Catholic Charities has been a really big player in the Vegas area. I believe that they have a women's shelter here, and they do, and I'm not saying they don't do good, okay, but let's talk about their money, because this is going to get really, really important. So I don't want to upset people and have them think that we're dogging on the Mormon Church, we're dogging on the Catholic Church, but let's look at this. Catholic Charities, for all the good they do, which they do, they look like approximately in 2012 that they collected more than $1.6 billion in U.S. contracts. Okay, so we have a separation of church and state. And in 2012, it was estimated that $1.6 billion comes from U.S. contracts and grants. And this is important because grants, in most cases, are tax-free money. So what the government is doing is the United States, and it is said that the United States government specifically gives the Catholic Charities so much money that it represents the contracts and the grants that the United States gives Catholic Charities. They basically flip about 65% of Catholic Charities' annual budget. Now, this is why this is a big deal, okay? They're not paying taxes. They're getting money in that they're not paying taxes on. Then, on top of that, the government is giving them contracts and grants. And it's funny because everybody's like, oh, we can't have a nanny state and all this kind of stuff. Well, Catholic Charities, 65% of the budget, if it's coming from the United States, that's basically the arm of the outreach for the United States. So you can say we don't have a nanny state, but if 65% of the budget of Catholic Charities is coming from the United States, that's kind of a nanny state, even though you don't see it because you think, oh, it's Catholic Charities. No, this money is coming from us, the taxpayers. So the Catholic Charities in specific is taking cash in that they are not paying taxes on. Then they're getting contracts and grants from the United States that is taxpayer money that we did pay in. And then they're giving them grants. So not only are they getting donations that they're not getting taxed on, but in turn, and again, we get to write those off, okay? I don't want to leave that out. But in turn, they're getting grants from the United States government. And that's kind of a double dip, in my opinion. And that's where the whole thing about, you see a lot of memes that come up, if churches paid taxes, it would pay for all of these food stamps and it would pay for all that. I don't know if any of that's true because I'm not an economist and I can't crunch the numbers. But what I can tell you is that doesn't sound right to me. Zoe just had a cat run across the keyboard. This is the fun stuff of being quarantined and doing this the way we do. What I can tell you is if you're getting donations tax-free, and then you're getting grants from the United States government, that's a double dip in my opinion. And there's got to be a way that they could not do that. And maybe they feel the United States government somehow feels that it's going to be cheaper for them to donate or give those grants to the Catholic Charities, and that maybe they have the logistics in place to do the reach out. I don't really know, but it sounds kind of bullshit to me. And again, this has nothing to do with how much good they do. This has nothing to do with it. This is about tax-free donations and tax-free grants. That's what we're talking about. And that's fucked up, because we will continue to pay into taxes, and this becomes a bigger deal. And so ever since basically when the U.S. government started giving contracts and grants to Catholic Charities, they received nearly a quarter of its funding at first during the 1960s, and then that jumped to more than half of Catholic Charities fundings by the late 1970s, and then more than 60% by the mid-1980s, and that's where it has remained to this day. And so this is the last thing that I came across that really pissed me off. And it's kind of a little bit of side note, but it is in relative to money. So there is certain vows that you take when you are part of the Catholic Church, and I'm sure other religions have the same vows, and some of them are chastity and obedience and poverty. Poverty is one of the vows within the Catholic Church. Now, priests do not take a vow of poverty, okay? They are expected to be paid a livable wage, and they are expected to, be comfortable. And I'm doing air quotes because obviously the more money you make, the more comfortable you're going to be. So priests can, be making somewhere in the neighborhood, depending on $23,000 to $45,000 a year. So in the Catholic Church specifically, priests are not married. They don't have a family. So some would say that's a good salary, but of course they still have family members and they still have other stuff that happens in their life, as we all do, that could come up. This is what pissed me off so bad, is that nuns have to take a vow of poverty. Along with a vow of obedience and a vow of chastity. And it is said that the reason why the nuns have to take a vow of poverty is because they've made a promise of a simplistic life, that they want to emulate Jesus as far as his time here on earth, and they are expected to work really interdependently in the community, and they should not be torn away from God by any material possessions. So just from a woman's standpoint, a priest doesn't have to. I'm so pissed off about this, and I know it doesn't sound like it right now, but when I first read this, I was like, you gotta be shitting me. A priest can handle his own fucking money and take a vow of chastity and obedience, but he doesn't have to be fucking poor. But a nun has to be poor. That something is wrong with that. And my friends who do not believe in God will always cite to me things in the Bible where the women are discriminated against. And it was a different time. And I'm a woman, and so I understand that. And as a believer in God, there's a lot of things that you understand, and you decide if you're okay with it or not, or you take it in your context, or you do what's going to be right for you. Like we said at the beginning of this series, Zoe's an atheist, I believe in God, but we're both pro-choice. So according to the Bible, that makes me a sinner because I am a pro-choice person. But the fact that when I see that a nun has to take a vow of poverty, it's so frustrating to me, because it's like, how do you even explain, well, that's okay, but a priest doesn't have to? And that, I think, is the hypocrisy of religion itself that gets at the core of this. And our time is money. And what I mean by that is every dollar that we earn is time out of our lives we spent earning it, where we could have been spending time with family or doing something fun. And that's why this is a big deal. That's why when you see these organizations that are getting these big tax breaks and things of this nature, it's not about the money as much as it is about the time that everybody gave up to donate those funds. And so that's as much information as I could find on the Catholic Church. And obviously a lot of history there. And quite frankly, a lot of their artifacts have been donated. So you can't really say too much.
Well, I neglected to even mention about the property that the Mormon Church reportedly owns, which was my bad. I mean, the Mormon Church reportedly owns over 1 million acres in America, where it runs, like I said, ranches, farms, orchards, hunting preserves, apparently. And it also owns farmland in Australia, UK, Brazil, Canada, Argentina, and Mexico. So, and we know, even particularly in Vegas, there are more churches than there are casinos.
Yep,
which
that's
is
true. Mm-hmm.
Which is bizarre. So, I touched on various other things, but, the property they own is unbelievable. And what you were just saying about the inequality between men and women, I mean, that's a whole other podcast in terms of the Mormon religion too.
So let's see. So next week we're going to be back with you guys, and we're going to close out our series, and we're going to talk a little bit about. We've kind of talked a lot about televangelists. We've talked a lot about nonprofits in the church sector, and so we're going to look at the compensation of some nonprofits. We're going to look at kind of as far as the money that they bring in, because they're going to be subject to the same rules as the churches are. And we're going to look at, is that realistic? We had referred to in the previous episode about Joe Osteen making $200,000 a year for his priestly salary until he stopped taking it in 2005. Is that normal? Because it might sound like it might sound like a big number to some people, but according to their overall budget, it only represents 0.22% of their actual budget. But is $200,000, was that normal? Was that standard? Or was that considered more? And so we're just going to kind of take the information we've gotten from the churches and through just our research, and we're going to compare it to non-religious nonprofits, and we're going to kind of see how they actually stack up. So we will be returning with you guys next week. Please stay healthy, but also stay away from scams if at all possible. And we will be back here with you next week, and we will...
Yeah, don't be sniffing no masks. If someone comes to the door and says, sniff my mask...
No ether.
Say no.
No ether. Do not sniff a mask at all. And we'll be talking to you guys next week. Follow us on social media at Finances Other F Word. And if you want to have any consultation with me concerned about any of the situations, you can go ahead and reach out to me at Mel at Hot Moon Financial. And then if you would like to be part of Stormy's free webinar series, you can reach out to him at STORMIE at yokel, YOKEL, local, LOCAL.com, and put Finances the Other F Word in the subject. And other than that, I guess we will talk to you guys next week.
Yes, indeed. And if you just want to bash on me for being a religious hater, or just talk to me about my cats, then you can email me at bigsisfish@gmail.com.
Fair enough.
Cheerio.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening. Please check back for upcoming episodes and follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Finances the Other F Word.